we'll resume. Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to have interrupted you. If you could pick up from where we didn't leave off.
I'll try to recap, Mr. Kidd, if I may. We were talking about what changed during the 18 months between the viability assessment on Scheme 1 and the equivalent for Scheme 2, and what had changed to make the statement in bullet point 1 at page 37 no longer accurate, I think. And you were giving me 3 factors that had changed. The first was an improvement in the market. The second was physical changes to the proposed building, which would reduce building costs, as I understand it. And the third was a change in investment climate.
Absolutely right. And I was about to go on to say, with regard to an improvement in the investment climate, that caused us to improve the leverage that would be available, so the loan-to-value ratio, and to recognise that interest rates had reduced in the intervening period, and those factors helped to produce an improvement in the IRR, the internal rate of return, for the project. And for the 127-room version of it, it went from a somewhat disappointing 8% to something which was within the range of what would be deemed acceptable.
Which would be something over 12.
Something over 12.
I'm just going by your agreement to 12 to 20.
And what I'd said was that it was okay, but that the returns for the 147 were better and gave a greater level of investment comfort to those who were making those decisions.
Just so that I can understand that last point, am I right in understanding that you can make the return on the investment better by increasing the amount of borrowing relative to the invested capital, assuming that the market's improved sufficiently, the market for borrowing?
Typically, the answer to your question is yes. It isn't just the borrowing, it's the cost of borrowing aligned to the amount of, or the proportion of borrowing, and given that the interest rate at which borrowing would be deemed to be present is at a lower rate than an equity investor's expected rate of return, then that causes the overall discount factor to reduce, which ultimately helps in this calculation.
But is the flip side of that coin, if I can put it that way, that the greater the borrowing relative to the invested capital, the greater the risk inherent in the capital investment? Because, for example, interest rates can go up as well as down. And I think since the date of the viability assessment on Scheme 2, interest rates have started slowly to claw back up again. And that presumably must be a risk that would concern an investor once you've started changing the leverage ratio.
To try and answer all of those various points,
Sorry.
if I miss anything, I'm sure you'll pick me up. Interest rates have started to creep up a little bit, but the effective interest rates at which loans are being made are not done at the headline bank rate. There hasn't been an appreciable rise in interest rates since those small increases to the base rate have happened. But notwithstanding that, you talk about risk. Lenders will not lend if they perceive the loan-to-value ratio to have crept up to a level that would be unwise for them to lend at or for the borrower to borrow at. So there are some built-in
checks and balances.
Precautions, checks and balances, call them what you like, that means that a responsible lender won't just keep upping that loan-to-value ratio. And what typically has happened in the past, where we've gone through bad cycle or downward cycles and whatever in the past, a lot of lending was done unwisely, in my view, at a higher loan-to-value ratio than the borrower should have been entitled to. Overzealous lenders, overzealous borrowers, and no doubt overzealous valuers at times.
Well, that, I suppose, brings me to the next point. Could you look, please, at page 49 of the developer statement? I'm still on the September 2015 one. CD 39.
Page 49.
39.
39. I'm so sorry.
Sorry, it's CD 39. It's page 49.
Okay, I have page 49.
And it's the second paragraph on the page. The second sentence after the reference to Rosewood being on board. Full funding for the project's £75 million investment has been secured. Now, the first question is, was that accurate as at September 2015?
I do not know.
Do you know whether it's accurate today?
I haven't been given the information to be able to answer your question. It may well be that other witnesses will be able to.
From the funding point of view, is there an inherent difficulty just at the moment in that there are two schemes at appeal with different capital demands and different risk appetites? So what someone who might want to invest in one might not want to invest in the other, to put it bluntly.
It's entirely possible. But if you're looking to reduce the risk, then you would go for the slightly larger scheme in order that those risks can be minimised.
Quite. But it might be a reason why investors aren't yet on board, from a practical point of view.
You will have to ask the relevant witness. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
On the second question, I wasn't asking for the information. I was just asking whether, in your experience, perhaps you haven't experienced a situation like this where there are two possible proposals, either or both of which could get planning permission, whether it would be likely in that scenario that anyone would invest in either, not knowing yet what the outcome was.
In a very general sense, I would expect the developers to have used their best endeavours to ensure that both are funded, but I can't comment beyond that.
Thank you. Helpful. We've been looking at CD 39. I wonder if you could look next, please, at CD 201. and this is the developer's statement for Scheme 2. Do I take it that this is in the same category as the last one? You may have seen it, but it doesn't ring a bell immediately.
Correct.
It's a slightly unusual document in that it's fairly short on new text, and it then has the previous developer statement, the one we've just been looking at, as Appendix A. So from page 19 to 56, it's what we've just been looking at, and it's only the first 18 pages that are new. And if you look at the note underneath the contents on the back of the cover, which is before the page numbering starts, we're told that the developer's statement, this developer's statement should be read as a continuation of the previous planning and listed buildings applications. The developer's statement previously submitted and dated 3rd September 2015, Appendix A, and its content remain relevant to the following statement. And I haven't been able to find any reference to viability or any reference to why the table that we looked at a minute ago showing 8% and 15 and 15 at page 37 has changed at all. So what the developers seem to have been proposing in Scheme 2 was exactly the same viability analysis as they had for the first scheme, together with a statement that 127-room hotel wouldn't meet the minimum required IRR. And no other explanation at all. Can you help me at all on how that came about, or where one would have found the answer in relation to Scheme 2?
You'll forgive me, but I can't. But I'm sure that following witnesses will be fully prepared to answer the question.
Most grateful, not least because they've now heard it. Earlier on, I should have asked you, when did you first come on board the team, as it were, the appellant's team?
From the very beginning, that HVS's relationship with Urbanist commenced. You will have seen mention of a colleague of mine, Harry Douglas. He and I have been together working on this project from the outset.
And is that 2014 or going back earlier than that?
I think it was 2014, but if it was earlier than that, then it was earlier than that. We've
Fine.
both been around for a while.
Fine, thank you. Now, if I could just ask you a few questions on a completely different topic. Displacement. I think you heard the questions that Mr. Innes asked of Mr. Logan this morning. And I just want to explore that just a little more from a practical point of view. As I understand the theory of this six-star hotel that's proposed, it's to enable people to come to Edinburgh and spend their money here who previously haven't, because there wasn't a sufficiently luxurious hotel available in Edinburgh. Is that the basic idea?
It's part of it, but it's not the totality of it. Obviously, there are people who come to Edinburgh at the moment and who will continue to come to Edinburgh and who would like to stay in something more akin to what they're used to elsewhere, but settle for something which is, in their view, inferior. But there will be an element of new demand.
I was just coming to that. I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the idea of the new visitors coming to a hotel that wasn't here before and wouldn't have persuaded them to come to Edinburgh was that they had a great deal of money to spend and would then spend it in Edinburgh and the wider Scottish economy. So that would be purely new money and I can quite see that would be a step change in bringing new money to the Scottish economy. What I have more difficulty understanding, though, is the category that you were just moving on to, the people who at the moment are staying in five-star hotels in Edinburgh because they either want to come here very badly or they have to come for business or other reasons. They're staying in five-star hotels, the Balmoral, Waldorf, Astoria, something of that nature. They might have lots of money and would like the greater luxury of a six-star hotel, and I can see that they would easily migrate across as soon as a six-star hotel arrived. What I have difficulty understanding, and please help me, is the money that they would have spent in the economy staying in a five-star hotel, apart from the hotel bill, why should they spend any more just because they're staying in a six-star hotel?
First of all, they may stay for longer, which is good news. Secondly, they may not be staying in Edinburgh's hotels. They may be staying elsewhere. They may be coming in from other hotels within striking distance of Edinburgh, but not necessarily within Edinburgh itself. It's conceivable that someone staying, for example, Gleneagles, St Andrews, it's not that far to come. So their dissatisfaction with what's on offer at the moment in Edinburgh may translate itself in that particular regard. But you're right. Having a so-called six-star luxury, what are we going to call it? We know what we're talking about. Having that hotel within Edinburgh will encourage some people who just wouldn't come to Edinburgh otherwise, and bring completely new people, new money.
I'll leave it to Mr. Innes to explore the proportions of the new and the old. But going back to the old for a moment, the people who are going to migrate across, I can see the argument that they may stay longer, but if they wanted to do some shopping, say, would they really be likely to spend any more just because they stayed an extra couple of days?
I could answer flippantly and said, you haven't met my wife.
I was thinking of mine, actually.
I haven't met your wife. What does staying longer actually mean? Sometimes you want to spend 2 days in a venue, and because there's somewhere nicer to stay, instead of staying one night and coming day one and leaving at day two, you'll spend a second night, or if you're there for 2 nights, you maybe go for 3. Having more time in a place gives you more opportunity, and therefore, if you have the money, and we're talking about people for whom disposable income is probably not in the same league as the people with the greatest respect within this room. Their disposable levels of income are greater. Their propensity to spend is greater. And therefore we have to put ourselves into their mindset. And if they are here for longer, they're going to spend more. And it will be on retail, or it may be on excursions, or it may be on another very nice special meal out, and so forth.
That's the theory.
Well, no, that's what happens. That's what happens.
Thinking about the people who've migrated out of one of Edinburgh's existing 5 stars into a new 6, would you expect the spaces created in the existing 5 stars to be filled fairly easily?
Effectively, that's what we're saying in this cannibalization, is that the demand for Edinburgh is very strong. And you create a little gap, and a good operator will fill it. And our feeling was that within a couple of years, any effect of that displacement would have been restored.
Oh.
And once you get above 80% occupancy, very few hotels are going to be complaining.
Well, we'll come back to the displacement in a moment. But thinking about the people who are going to be moving into the spaces created in the 5-star hotels, they're not going to be spending at the uber-rich level, if I can put it that way, are they? Because they're finding their level, as it were, in the 5-star hotel. So that won't be step-changing the contribution to the economy, will it?
Well, it depends where those people have come from. If there's been a gradual shift, a sort of flight to quality, and all of a sudden the people that might have been staying in something even further down the food chain can now afford to stay where they would have preferred to stayed, then there'll be a gradual improvement.
Well, isn't that exactly the point, that if we're looking at the contribution to the economy, it may be what the backpackers are bringing to the economy rather than the people who've moved from the 5 to 6-star hotel, because they would have been here anyway.
I think we're looking at this in a slightly narrow environment. The stated aim of Edinburgh is to improve the overall quality and to get the proportion of higher spending visitors up and the amount that people are spending up, as opposed to purely the volume up. And certainly my belief is that when you can accomplish that, your overall economic improvement is benefited. And I think that's the point that Mr. Logan was making. And I'm not an economist, I hasten to add. But looking at it in broad terms, the movement to improving quality, and by bringing in an additional hotel that we all accept is now world-class luxury, 6 or 7-star colloquially, will help in that process.
Could I ask you finally just one little question that's been worrying me personally? These super rich people who are going to be staying in the proposed 6-star hotel, Mr. Gibb told us that because of a lack of provision of parking at the proposed hotel in both schemes, people were going to have to come in from the airport in a taxi and from the Waverley station in a taxi. Is that the sort of standard of luxury that the people who would be using a hotel of this nature would expect?
What you and I might call a taxi might turn out to be something more akin to a limousine, and not necessarily have the word taxi plastered over the roof. But it would be a private car of a slightly better quality, perhaps, that would bring them from the airport if that's the way they had arrived, or from the station if that's where they had arrived. But essentially, I imagine that a significant majority of the guests of the hotel will not be driving themselves there if they're staying overnight, unless they're people from within the overall vicinity who are attending an event, a wedding or a dinner or a lunch or something like that.
I quite take your point that they would be expecting a chauffeur-driven car. My concern was that there didn't seem to be any provision on either of the hotel schemes for chauffeur-driven cars to be provided by the hotel, unlike the Rosewoods in London, Paris, Tuscany.
I can't comment off the cuff like that. If you want me to delve into my reports and give you a further confirmation, I'm happy to do so.
If you could, for my own curiosity, I'd be grateful. Thank you, sirs.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kett. Mr. Kett, we're operating off one camera, and at the risk of distressing the producers, as it were, we'll have to make sure we turn off our microphones when we're not speaking, because the camera tracks the microphone rather sinisterly. And so if you can remind me, I'll remind you, and we'll hopefully get there. Could I ask you, please, to look at your precognition, paragraph 35? Now, in this section, you recognise Shall we relax about that drill? I think we shall. We recognise that the World Heritage Site needs to be maintained by the city. You'd accept that? And that if we look at EW27, which is a document that is produced by your organisation, first, I'd like just to, in a sense, just set this up. So if you've never seen it before, I have an opportunity to read it, but it appears to be branded HVS. Do you recognise it?
I do.
Now, I just wanted to ask you to, well, perhaps I should read the first paragraph at you and then ask a question. So, Edinburgh is the economic, cultural and political capital of Scotland and has consistently been voted one of the most desirable places to live in the world, contributing to its rapid population growth over the last decade. A compact city steeped in history with notable cityscapes and exceptional views. The UNESCO World Heritage Site is a renowned weekend break destination with an expanding international airport and fast rail links on the East Coast Main Line branch. Now, passing over the use of the word branch in that sentence, would you accept that the World Heritage Site designation, in the way that it illustrates the heritage of Edinburgh and its values, is a really quite important part of the reason people come here in the first place?
I'm not convinced that it is so in terms of the isolation of it, but it contributes to it.
Alongside those people who are coming from business, for the financial services sector and other businesses that are based here, and it will contribute coming to the university, and it will contribute coming here to the whole of Scotland, and this will be their starting point for a visit to Scotland.
Conceivably so.
But that heritage and the fact that Edinburgh is a place of heritage is a factor. You'd accept that?
I do.
Now, would you accept that when it's necessary to balance the economic benefits of undertaking a change to Edinburgh, one has to bear in mind the risk that you might damage the city's reputation? As a factor, I accept we might disagree about what the rating of that factor is, but would you accept it's a factor in the consideration?
I can see that.
Talk about an issue you raised in your precognition. You were talking about it at paragraph 49 of your precognition. It's to do with access, because you responded to issues raised by those instructing me. And you've explained, I think, in paragraph 49, why you think this is a hotel with an element of public access.
Correct.
And so I wanted just to ask you a series of questions about that, starting off with, you've also explained that the customers of this hotel are looking for privacy and security. You'd accept that?
I would.
So in the concept of privacy and security, that's going to involve people, for example, not expecting to see people who aren't residents in certain parts of the hotel, in very broad terms, particularly residential corridors, the spa, that sort of thing.
Not quite. The residential corridors, the bedroom floors and so forth, will clearly be only accessible to those who are genuine overnight guests. Totally accept. The spa, however, will have an element of outside use, so not just the residents of the hotel, but those outside guests who would make an advance reservation for a beauty treatment or wellness treatment or whatever. So they would be expected, not just necessarily walking in off the street.
I understand. And you'd also expect people who reserved a table in the restaurant, or even someone who wants to go possibly to the whiskey bar in Scheme 1.
Yes.
Now, again, I have to be... I'm careful here to make sure I understand that what you've done, because I don't want to explore an area where you haven't looked into this. you've described how you have financial information, which I'm not going to ask about, to do with viability. But have you also had meetings with Rosewood about what they're planning to do, or do you derive your discussion of their offer from your general knowledge of their business as an expert in this field?
The latter.
So if you could have in front of you CD 228, which is the ground floor plan for Scheme 2, please, and perhaps to save time, CD 111 and CD 112, which are the lower ground and upper ground floor plans for Scheme 1. Perhaps those could be as well there as well. I'm going to explain what I'm going to do to save time, and then when we get them, you can understand. We've obviously had evidence from the architect, and we've obviously been around the drawings, and we're all very familiar with them. And I want just to understand a little bit about public access. And if at any point you want to simply say that's an operational matter for the hotel manager, then I quite understand and will stop. Firstly, have you seen these drawings or something like them at some point in your process?
Something certainly like them. Not quite as flashy as this.
No, I only got PDFs. So if you could start on CD 228.
Sir, it's obviously entirely a matter for you, but we have been over this extensively with the architect as to what is available, what's not available, and I do wonder whether this witness, who's got a particular expertise, is going to be able to assist the state of knowledge about this at all. Sir, I do question the relevance, but if you're finding this helpful, given the time, and I now don't think we're going to finish the evidence this week, having assessed it, the way things are going, sir, but if this is helpful and relevant, fine, but my submission is that this is simply irrelevant with this witness.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the question is yet, so noted for now.
The question is simple, and I want to give you the opportunity to fully understand it, so I'm not going to sort of ask you a question and then follow up with these maps. I got the impression that one of the things you thought was an important part of a luxury hotel, and we can get what that means in a moment, at the highest end of the market, was not just privacy and security, but also a view, the sense that you can see out and see the city from your dining room and actually appreciate that you're there. And that seemed to be, from your reports, something that you felt was important in the premium or luxury market.
Indeed so.
Are you aware, and I'm showing you the plan, this one, so that there's no attempt to not show you it, that in this design, in the fine dining room and in the all-day lounge dining rooms, with the two hexagonal spaces, in one sense, each side of the reception hall, there are no windows to the south with the view. Are you aware of that?
I can see that from the plans that you've shown me.
And similarly, the reception hall, which is currently the school assembly room, only has a door to the south and no windows. Were you aware of that?
It was there when I saw it, yes.
So you've been to the site. So we don't need to go to the second drawings. What I want to be clear is that, do you maintain the view that you have to have views to have a new building as a hotel at this class? Is that something that we should take away as a takeaway from this?
I think if you're looking at, in isolation at a couple of places within the hotel, important that they are to the overall sense of arrival, you don't necessarily always have to see the views from every spot. And certainly by the time you go to other areas within the hotel site, you will have the spectacular views that have been referred to.
Again, in order to keep this as short as possible, in this scheme, this is Scheme 2. Now, we've all looked at the drawings, and so the reporters can look at this, and I'm only giving the drawing so you can check this. Would you accept that you're looking at an all-day brasserie with one southward-facing window and a few eastward-facing ones, and a bar lounge with one southward-facing window and a few west-facing lounges, and that's the entirety of windows from dining and drinking? I'm not quite sure that's the right word, but dining and drinking places in the hotel. The spa is subterranean to a greater degree, and the conference centre has a glass wall. I appreciate that. But is that your understanding of the project before we get on to the bedrooms?
That is what these plans show.
And of the bedrooms, does it matter to you that a percentage of them, I think I worked out it was 39 or so out of 120, face onto the hill and the rest face south? Does that matter again to the decision about whether there are impressive views?
It matters more to the price that you can charge for those with the impressive views, I would suggest.
Good. Now, if you could put the plan away, we don't need to go to the other ones. I want to explore the topic of what is a six-star hotel. And it may be that actually it's very easy and that you can accept what I'm going to say, we can agree and we can move on. Or maybe we have to go through it in some depth. But I read your APP3 report, which is the one that Mr. Thompson took you to, which had the letters at the front. And I got the impression from page 6, that this was an area which you variously described as much disputed. You talked about things being generally accepted and that intra-level differentiation is largely inadequate. You've talked about intangibles. You've talked about mystique and things being hard to define. And would I be right in saying that drawing a line between a five-star hotel and a six-star hotel is more an art than a science?
Given that we're not talking about a classification system, which by definition has got the science, then it is by interpretation, expectation, art, yes.
And so having been through your reports and read your discussion of the hotel offers in the other cities, amongst them being Prague, Barcelona, that sort of thing, I noticed, and it's merely an inconsistency which I've put to you to comment on, that there are hotel brands that in Edinburgh you comment as thinking are of as five-star and not premium, but when those brands appear in other cities, you include them in the premium category. Is this just an illustration of how this is a slightly soft boundary?
Without going into specifics, it might be, because certain branded hotels can turn out to be of better quality in different locations, even though they are within the same brand.
Presumably, if you're a brand in general, you might have invested more in one hotel than a different one, and maybe you have a plan to bring another one up later, but we wouldn't know about that necessarily.
It's sometimes as a result of hotels becoming rebranded that they are somewhat different to other hotels within the same overall brand. And it may be simply because the brand has been placed on a building that is of an historic quality rather than a newly built, straight up and down design.
Again, not wanting to go through all the detail because I think it might take too long, I got the impression that a number of the premium hotels in the cities you looked at were purpose-built 19th century buildings. Some of them were brand new, and some of them were adaptations. There seemed to be no particular obvious fixed rule there.
Typically, you can't be and we'll use the word six-star hotel for the moment. You can't be a so-called six-star hotel if you have small rooms, if you have a level of service which is not exceptional, if you have interior furnishings and fittings which are ordinary. You have to be a cut above all of that to be classified as a so-called six-star hotel.
But if we look at those particular Edinburgh and Scottish-based hotels, now, I took a lead from Mr. Steele from yesterday and I visited Mr. Google. Now, I appreciate it's only Mr. Google, but would you accept that if you go around and Google Luxury Hotel Scotland, lots of people say they're a luxury hotel and you might not necessarily agree with them and you might have a disagreement with them about the meaning of what that means?
I would say it's inevitable.
And so, again, without naming hotels, there are other hotels in Edinburgh and Scotland, in fact, including one category I found, a train, that claims it's a luxury hotel. And you presumably wouldn't agree with them and they wouldn't agree with you. And that's the nature of this problem of being not a legally fixed system. It's your opinion and no doubt opinion as an expert.
Correct.
Thank you. Now, I want to just move on briefly to the back to table 2-1, which is again in APP3, which you were looking at, Mr. Thompson. Table on page 7. Could you find that again?
I have it.
Thank you. I hate to do it, but I think I have to walk through it. I won't be able to do one of the. I can miss out one category because Mr. Thompson dealt with it. But if we start at the top of the right-hand two columns, and you, if I've got this right, feel that there is a distinction to be drawn here between these two columns, and I want to see where we fall based on the evidence that we've heard so far. So, ownership model, both columns are the same at management agreement only, and we're told by a different witness that we have a management agreement in this case. So we can pass on past that one. Would you accept that they're basically the same for the two categories? Right. What is the difference between a management agreement in a full-service hotel and a luxury hotel?
The word that is different in these two columns is usually. And in this case, what we're trying to show is the distinction between a five-star hotel and the brand that's on a five-star hotel. Certain five-star brands will allow the owner either to self-operate with a franchise agreement or to employ a third-party management company and then brand the hotel with a franchise agreement. What we're saying is in the 6 or 7-star hotel, the right-hand column, is that you wouldn't get any of those operators allowing the owner to self-manage and to have a franchise agreement for the use of the brand on that property.
But if we move on to service, okay, again, in service, I get the impression that what we were dealing with here was something that's a little bit of a soft definition because there are more things listed in the right-hand column than the left. And this goes back to the art rather than the science problem that classification systems have. You'd accept that?
I would.
Right. Moving on down to the property. Now, can I just check that in the column for full service, when you say repositioned, you actually mean repurposed? Because I imagine that's not quite right.
No, I mean repositioned in the sense that it's an existing hotel that has been upgraded.
I understand. Right. So, in this case, if something's been built as a luxury hotel and is still in the full service category, it wouldn't be repositioned, but it might start as a lower grade and be moved into this category.
Possibly.
Possibly. Right. So, again, to go back to the lists that you prepared, would you accept that there are hotels in the list you prepared that you've assessed as full service that are in purpose-built or indeed repositioned classes? And there are also hotels that you've assessed as luxury that have been repositioned from a lower grade as well?
It can happen.
Thank you. We move on to cost of conversion. Now, I'm relying here on a figure that came out of CD 205, which I think might well be a Collier's document, but CD 205 at page 18 gives a cost per room of £425,000. Is that a figure you recognise for this project?
Not intimately.
We can no doubt deal with that witness. If that was the figure per room, would that not drop the cost of development into the full service column rather than the luxury column in this particular table?
If you go by the broad ranges that I've put into these two columns, strictly speaking, yes.
If we move on to the room size. Now, here, looking at the room sizes, it does seem we range from 31 square metres to the largest suites, 83. So that would appear to straddle both and head quite a long way into the right-hand column. You'd accept that?
Yeah.
Number of bedrooms. Both projects could sit easily in terms of purely bedrooms in both columns. You're nodding. That's fine. And then in terms of the suite ratio, Mr. Gibb explained us it was an 18% suite ratio, so that would fall into full service. You'd accept that?
No. I think what you're doing is trying to be too scientific and not accepting that there are perhaps woolly edges. And just because something's 18, if you round 18, you get to 20. I'm being slightly flippant. You're in the right ballpark. You haven't quite got the 20% but you're not far off it.
I think I can cut this short then. So what effectively you're telling me is that we should view this exercise as a possibly difficult but possibly rewarding assessment of qualitative differences, which you as a hotel expert and many other people in your field are very capable of doing, and investors can make investment decisions based on that difference. But if we write it down in black and white, we're going to come unstuck because we can't precisely define it in a rigid, almost legalistic way. Is that something you'd accept?
If you're not prepared to have a degree of flexibility over certain aspects that typically are aspects that relate to converting an existing building rather than starting from scratch, and you're trying to maximize the investment returns by designing the building in such a way that you can put in a number of rooms that will enable you to do so, I think that there has to be a little flexibility.
Would you agree with me that it's not possible to define, in the way it was in the old star rating system, a 6-star hotel or a hotel of international standing or a 7-star hotel? These are not rigid concepts.
I disagree that it's not possible to define it. I agree that they're not rigid concepts, but they're positioned at such a level so that there is no doubt and there's a very clear understanding that what we're dealing with is not a, I'll use the word run-of-the-mill, 5-star hotel. These are special, and therefore, as long as some or all of the special considerations are being met, and it isn't always just in terms of physical, it's very often just in terms of the service levels that you're providing. You can put two very similar physical buildings side by side, but if your service levels are not up to snuff, then you won't get the higher average room rate that you're seeking. If your furnishings and the quality of the amenities that you're offering within the rooms are not sufficiently of a high standard, then it's going to be difficult.
Thank you. I think I've got one more thing on this topic. So you remember that mentioning to Mr. Thompson there have been new hotels have arrived in Edinburgh or are arriving. One of them was, I seem to remember, Virgin Hotels in India buildings, and another one was the W Hotel at the Edinburgh St James. Now, you haven't mentioned Virgin in your report, so I'm not going to ask you about it. But the W Hotel, you'd accept that in other locations that you've analysed, the W Hotel falls into the premium category, wouldn't you?
No.
But you've said that in your report.
The W Hotel started out life, I'm not saying this W Hotel, but W Hotels generally started out life as a sort of 4 to 5-star hotel, nothing more. They have developed a reputation for being a little bit more special, a little bit more edgy, and have developed for themselves a following. But they did not start out by having, for example, the quality of furnishings and fittings that would, in my view, be a luxury hotel, 6 or 7-star, whatever you want. They did not offer the level of service that would fall into that category. But they have been exceptionally successful as a brand in grabbing the attention and grabbing a following for themselves.
Because I'm confused and I may not understand this properly, and I think I probably need to, if we look at your document APP3, where you deal with Amsterdam, I'll make sure I'm on the right page. So I think that's page 15 and 16. I need to ask you a couple of questions. Now, you've got a table at the top of page 16, which is the selected premium versus 4-star market Amsterdam. You have a list of 4-star, a list of premium, and then some text. And you say premium hotels in this sample make up only 14% of the total selection. This will increase shortly with the introduction of a W hotel, the Hyatt Regency, and the Palace of Justice. Now, are you saying that I've got it wrong and that these 3 new hotels are not to be seen as 6-star luxury, whatever this higher category?
in their individual market of Amsterdam, the Palace of Justice, the Hyatt Regency and the W get moved into that higher category, but they are not of the same standard. Well, first of all, the Palace of Justice is of a far higher standard than the other two. It's not yet open, by the way, and it will be a Rosewood. The W Hotel, to the best of my knowledge, is a good standard 5-star hotel, but will not have quite the level of service and finishes and so forth that we're talking about here for the Rosewood Edinburgh. The Hyatt Regency is open. I've seen it. It is a very nice hotel. It is going to operate and does operate at the top end within the Amsterdam premium hotel market, but it is not of the same sort of standard as we're talking about here. I'm sorry if you're confused.
I think I understand. I just want to make sure that I want to make sure I'm fair with you. So you, who clearly has been doing this for a very long time and knows much more about hotels than I do, so I'm very careful if you're explaining these opinions to us, and we'll have to absorb them in due course. And we obviously can't ask questions of the people who are going to run this hotel because there's no witness from Rosewood, so we're left with asking you. And so your evidence seems to be that chains can be of different categories in different places, that you think, and that's one thing, and that you think, your opinion is that certain hotels in Edinburgh do meet a higher category and certain don't, even though those managers might not agree with you. Have I got that very short bit right?
You have.
Now, I want to just finally move on to a final category issue. You've talked about the management agreement, so I won't go back to that. But you mentioned in your precognition that you noted that the team had been praised by PKF. And you're obviously praising the team involved here. Am I right in saying that when I see it talk... Oh, now you're looking confused, so we better get to the right document. In your precognition, at the end of that, in paragraph 47, you have a quote at paragraph 48. The developers have put together an experienced team which typically enhances the project chances of success. Now, I was rereading the PKF document, and I thought the team was you and your colleague doing the assessment. Is that how you read it?
You have the advantage of having the document in front of you.
Well, let's get it in front of you. So it's CD 611. So 611 talks at various places about teams, and particularly it talks about the review of your methodology, and at the end it describes you and Mr. Human and Mr. Douglas as an experienced team. And then it seems to be saying at the end, in the conclusion, it's reviewing a report by Collier's, not your report at this point. This is this last paragraph. Having reviewed the report by Collier's, prepared by another highly respected industry professional, the developers have put together an experienced team which would typically enhance the project's success. I wanted to be clear. That doesn't seem to be talking about your review. It talks about somebody else's report. And so perhaps I should address questions about what's meant to the man from Collier's.
I think that would be better.
Right. Final question here, then. No, I think we've covered it all, Mr. Kent. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ennis, can you give us an idea of how long you might need for this? Conscious of what Mr. Steele was alluding to, that we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that we can...
Well, sirs, I think I will try and be as brief as I can. commensurate, and I don't have a large number of topics to go through. It's fairly focused. I think the challenge is that we've reached a stage in the inquiry where we need to really start knocking the witnesses off. And I think if we don't finish Mr. Kett today, I share Mr. Steele's issue and concern about completing matters. So I hopefully will be within half an hour.
Provided you're still feeling up to the task, I think we should proceed, Mr. Kett.
At the risk of being knocked off,
Yes.
which is more worrying, I think I'll go for the half hour.
Perfect, perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Innes.
I'm just wondering if a quick 5-minute might assist. I'm perfectly content, but the witness or Mr. Innes, because Mr. Innes's half an hours, with the very greatest respect, tend to be marginally longer, and I do think it would be very good to finish the witness today.
So I have noticed today that the air in the room has been less than perhaps other days, and I've certainly felt it heavier, and it's the first time in this whole inquiry that it's felt slightly airless, and I certainly think what happens, particularly if you're participating, is that it does leave you slightly, that a 5-minute break would probably do everyone probably quicker probably having the 5-minute break than not.
Okay, well, we'll come back at 22, which is 6.5 minutes.
Can we start off with cannibalisation, please? And I'm going to ask you to have CD 598. If we could start at section 4, because that starts the analysis. You've got it. Great. Well, I hope it's the same as the version that we have, but that's always the difficulty with inquiry documents. I'm just looking at this stage to just have a brief discussion with you about essentially what you're doing. In terms of Section 4, you're setting out the whole hotel supply market in Edinburgh. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And essentially, underneath, you set out that, and we'll come back to this, the impact of a 127-room hotel on the whole Edinburgh market is too small to quantify with any accuracy. And then you go on to say the pipeline of the 2,400 hotel rooms identified by Savills is a useful starting point and an overview of potential impact of new supply. Is that correct?
Correct.
And insofar as new supply is concerned, that will constantly be potentially added to by additional proposals coming forward and being consented and taken forward. Is that correct?
In the same way that some of the existing projects may disappear from view as well. So
Indeed.
You may have some plus, you may have some minus.
But insofar as the longer we project forward, the more likely that we may be missing some of the additional supply that comes into the market.
Depends how far
Yes.
how far forward you want to go, but there will also be. You would have thought that a future developer would take into account the prevailing levels of supply and demand at the time when they're ready to start developing, and not necessarily just go ahead blindly.
And insofar as Exhibit C is concerned, essentially we have, this is the number of rooms that are in hotels in Edinburgh. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, equally, would it be fair to say that in terms of tourist accommodation, there are alternative providers that aren't hotels? Is that correct?
Indeed.
And one of the characterisations of the Edinburgh market, would it be fair to say, is there are quite a lot of developers now who are moving what might call relatively upmarket apartments that are for hire, not Airbnb, but upmarket apartments, yes?
Indeed.
Yeah. And that, in some respects, is an alternative. If people don't want the fuss of staying at a hotel, they quite like having a kitchen, they want to come and enjoy actually cooking for themselves and perhaps living in the city.
Indeed.
And equally, as another of your witnesses is going to talk about, Airbnb is another form of tourist offer that's grown significantly in the Edinburgh market. Is that correct? Yeah. But in terms of sticking to the hotel market, what we see is that we've got figures for what the position was at 2016, and thereafter you've done a projection forward based on the likely additions to the supply over the next 4 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the extent to which that happens or doesn't happen will be dependent on a range of factors, including people having to make investment decisions.
And indeed planning decisions.
Yes. And insofar as we then, if we go to the bottom of the table, do we then have annual demand growth? And that has been running at levels of 7%, dropped to 2.5 in 2015, up at 6.2, 2016, and the rest are a flat projection going forward. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that, again, will ultimately be influenced by a range of factors which impact on tourist demand.
Indeed.
Yep. And from that, the occupancy growth presumably is related to the number of rooms that are available in the market against the annual demand growth. Is that correct?
That's right. It's a product.
So, yes. So the middle one is the product of the two forecasts that you put in. Yes. Insofar as you have done some conclusions in the Section 4 in relation to differing growth rates of demand, what you haven't forecast is, or tested is circumstances where adverse economic conditions actually saw a contraction in demand, have you?
No.
So if we're headed for a hard Brexit, and things went very differently for economic forecasts going forward, that these figures could change quite dramatically arising from such an important macroeconomic political situation. Is that correct?
If I were an economist, I would have a greater ease of answering that question.
But unfortunately, you're a hotel expert who's no doubt been up through the ups and downs of the hotel market. And no doubt there are times when hotel markets have suffered.
There have been.
Yes. That can be around economic circumstances, or it could be political circumstances.
Correct.
Now, I want to go and look at the impact on the Edinburgh full service market, please. That's section 5. Now, in terms of what this incorporates, do we see under above Exhibit E on page 15, the description of what you've put into this particular assessment? And this one's quite important because it is the one you've ultimately used in the cannibalisation assessment, isn't it?
Correct.
Now, in terms of the full service market, you've also included within this assessment the upper mid-scale. How would you define the upper mid-scale?
Closest would be 4 stars in language that hopefully everybody would agree.
And upscale?
4 and a bit.
Upper upscale? Well, no, I've got upscale. Is that still up?
You understand that this is not a precise science. But if we start at 4 and go to 5, the continuum is upper mid-scale, upscale. Sorry, I'll start again. Upper mid-scale, upscale, upper upscale, and then luxury. And you start at 4 and you end up at 5 in broad brush terms.
Where's the 5 sit?
Where does the 5 sit?
5-star sit.
Where you've got the luxury class here. In the old AA designation, that's what they would be.
Okay, so perhaps easier, Mr. Kett, is for some purposes, luxury includes hotels like the Waldorf or the Sheraton, whereas you're saying that essentially the distinction you're making is the a sort of extra luxury category that has got a even more luxurious tone than those, is it? Because otherwise we could spend an endless debate about what is luxury and luxury. Those hotels are luxury, but then you're saying they're not quite in the same category as what would be proposed on the appeal side. Is that really what you're trying to say?
It is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but you have to recognise that this table, Exhibit F, the title of the column above which you've just quoted says STR class.
Yes.
Now, STR is a very reputable benchmarking service, and they categorise hotels into those buckets. And there is nothing beyond the luxury class bucket.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that there needs to be for this purpose.
Okay. And insofar as the scale of this is concerned, how much of this table comprises upper mid-scale?
One hotel, according to Exhibit F.
No, that's the future full supply. What I'm asking about is the quantifying the potential impact in terms of the STR census. What contribution does upper mid-scale make to the total number?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay. In terms of what do you understand by the term primary competitor?
We use it in HVS to define a group of hotels that you would be aiming to get as much as possible of their business if you were competing head-to-head, and they would be trying to do the same. So as close to matching levels of business as you can.
Okay. And a secondary competitor?
Hotels where you're competing for part of their business, but not all of their business, and vice versa.
And what's below secondary?
Tertiary. You tend to limit it to just primary and secondary. You accept that in a global sense, in theory, you're competing with absolutely every hotel in the city, every Airbnb and every service department and whatever. But when you're doing an investment appraisal of this nature, you have to draw the line somewhere. And to keep it all transparent, that's as far as we typically go.
Could I ask you to look at document CD53, which is another name for the report that you did in August 2015, but I think it's the reference for the original report, i.e. the one that was lodged with the first application.
CD53?
Yes. And if we could go, first of all, to table 517 of the document on page 49, please. Do we see, ask us, have you got that? Yeah. Now, in 517, that says the facilities of the primary competitors, and we see there the Balmoral, the Hilton, the G&V and the Sheraton there. Do we see that? And in terms of being primary competitors, you identify that they've got restaurants and lounges, spa and health club, meeting rooms, and meeting space. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that one of the characteristics of what we might call this type of category of hotel, is that they tend to offer a bit more than just basic accommodation and food and beverage?
Yes, in service in particular.
Yeah. And so what we see there, and equally when we're looking at the restaurants and lounges, these hotels have quality offerings which, and I think as some of you said, have named chefs, etc. So they tend to be a bit more than your standard hotel restaurant. Would that be fair?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the Edinburgh scene, these would, as currently constructed, these would be key competitors of the future hotel at the appeal site. Was that correct?
Correct. That's what we've assumed.
Yeah. And as well as competing in terms of, as we've seen, the other characteristic of these hotels is it's not just only the accommodation cost that builds up their overall turnover. They're making money from the restaurants, the spa, the meeting rooms and events.
They should be.
Yeah. And I think you've got in the appeal proposals, there's a ballroom and an event space.
Correct.
Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise you that I've been to events at almost all these hotels, and one of the characteristics of them is they can accommodate and have facilities to cook for larger events.
Correct.
Yep. And it's therefore not surprising when you were doing your calculations of the proposed hotel that approximately 40% of the turnover was made up of income that wasn't derived from the accommodation cost.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, if we turn over the page, we see paragraph 518, that in this document you identify the secondary competitors to the new entrant hotel as being Edinburgh upscale market. Do we see that?
I do.
Yes. So that would encapsulate the upscale and upper upscale characteristics, would it?
In this context, yes.
So, insofar as these hotels are concerned, is it likely that while some of them may have some of the facilities, they don't rank to the same extent and quality as those of the primary competitors?
That's right.
Yeah. And when we get back, if we look at the combined level of numbers in this, we've got 847 in the primary competitor category and 2,879 in the secondary competitors. Is that right? So that just gives us just over, 3,700, about 3,700 bedrooms. Is that correct?
Except that you've missed out the select service market. If you look at 519 on the next page.
Yeah, but you've listed all what you consider to be the secondary competitors, haven't you, there?
We have in 518, but we haven't ignored the select service markets.
Yeah.
Your question was relating to the secondary competitors, and I was just clarifying that the secondary competitors include all of those above in 518, but also 7,870 rooms in the select service market, which is further down the quality scale.
Yeah. So
and just for clarity, what we're saying is they are competitive, but only a little bit competitive to a level of 10%, as opposed to the upscale market, which we were just talking about, which is 75% competitive.
So 10% on the select service, 75% on the upscale market. And what about the primary competitors?
100%.
Right, great. Yes, because that helpfully makes the point in some respects, because that's very useful, Mr. Kerr. Because when I look at this impact on the full-service market, and I look at the number of 8,876 at 2022, what we can see is that there's a significant proportion of that that's only 10% competitive with the future hotel.
I understand.
Yeah. And if we look down at Exhibit F, the full-service supply, can we see that within that particular element, that in terms of what's coming onto the market, we've got the W Hotel and the Virgin Hotel, which are in the luxury category. Do they go into the 100% competitor category?
I would need to check.
And the other two are upscale class, so they would go into the, as you described, is it 75% category?
Well, secondary competitors,
yeah,
yes.
Yes.
I'm hesitant because part of me wants to say that the two that are described by STR as luxury class are not in the same league as the Royal High School.
I sort of get that point, Mr. Kett, that they're not in the same category, but they might be in the same category as competing quite heavily with things like the Sheraton and the Waldorf, etc. Would that be fair?
They would be.
So they go into the primary competitor category?
Most probably.
Yes.
Can I make one other statement to help clarify for you?
Yes. Mr. Kett, if you've got something you want to add, absolutely. Just add it.
I just want to help. This whole primary, secondary, and whatever, there's an art to this, as has been mentioned earlier, but there is a little bit of science. And in order for us to make the calculations in our report, when we start off, we want to start with a number of room nights that are occupied. And in order to do so, we take the primary competitors and we say, okay, we apply 100% of those. So we look at their aggregate occupancy, we apply 365 days of the year, and we come to a number of room nights. We do the same exercise with the 75% competitors. We take their occupancy, multiply it all up, and eventually we get a number of room nights for the total competitive market. And that becomes our starting point for the supply side. We then grow the supply according to when we feel the new hotels are going to come on stream. And we grow the demand according to our research that says this is how we expect demand to grow over the coming years. And the interaction of demand and supply produces the market-wide occupancy in each case.
And of course, when it's masked under 8,800, that doesn't have the subtlety of identifying the classifications that are coming into the market, whether it's a 100% competitor or a 75% competitor, or whether it's a 10% competitor. Is that right?
Inevitably.
And one of the problems with that is that when we come to the next stage of this whole process, is that what we're really interested in is where the rooms are coming from to add up to your new hotel. Do you understand that? That's what this whole exercise is building to, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Mr. Kett, can we just perhaps go there and get to section 6, please? So I understand that what you've done in reaching your 29,000 figure is, in a way, I need to understand the market that this hotel is going to play in. So you say I take 100% of the key competitors, that's correct, 75% of the secondary competitors, and about 10% of the other competitors, and that all adds up into room nights. I then work out what my competitive offer is in my 127 hotel, and then you have to come to a judgment about how much of that 127 is going to be occupied from the existing operators. Is that correct?
Not quite.
No?
That exercise that I described is when we're looking at the micro effect of the individual hotel. Here we're looking at the macro effect. So you don't have that distinction of primary, secondary, and whatever. You said earlier we're dealing with the broader market of 130-some properties.
And another way of doing it would have been to actually break it down into the subsectors so that we could understand, for example, what the effect was on significantly increasing the luxury class, because that's going to have an effect. The Virgin hotels and the W hotels are all going to have the effect because they've been built and occupied before the new hotel could open. Isn't that right?
That's the assumption that
Yes.
we made.
Yes. So, we'll accept the figure of 29,152, and I suppose the issue that I have with you, Mr. Kett, is the value of the 29,152 rooms in terms of a value. You've provided an aggregate average daily rate of £135, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, do you accept that the competitive pressures on the hotels will not be on an average? You've set out the basis. It's 100% competition with the higher class hotels, 75 on the secondary and only 10 on the tertiary. So in terms of the rooms that you're going to capture, that it's going to be skewed towards the key competitors, isn't it?
What you're saying is not quite correct, and I'm sorry to pick you up on this. This is averaged across the whole market, not weighted in any way.
Yes.
So the 135 is across the whole market.
Yes, but the point is that when the competitive pressure comes to bear and we're working out how the value of that, the likelihood is that your new hotel is going to compete more vigorously with the higher value hotels than the average, isn't it?
Correct.
And therefore, if I'm doing a value of the transfer of those rooms, I should not apply the average, but I would have to come to a higher figure to work out what was likely to be displaced from individual hotels, wouldn't I?
Yes, but you'd have to start with a different number of room nights.
Yeah. Well, the point is you've estimated, based on your analysis, that 29,000 room rates are going to come from other hotels. That's correct?
Across the market, yes.
And within that, within the rooms that are coming from the market, there's going to be it's not going to be predominantly the bottom end of the market. It's going to be more towards the top end of the market, isn't it? Because that's your offer.
That's how the average works.
Well, no. If you've averaged what the room rate would be across the market, that's 135. If your hotel captures more rooms that are above the average rate, then the value transfer is higher than 135. Do you see that?
I see that, but not for the whole number of rooms.
Well, yes, but so the question then comes is what proportion of the 29,000 is displaced from the higher end hotels? Have you got a figure for that?
I don't.
Can you even contemplate a figure for that? No.
I wouldn't.
And secondly, can you say what proportion of the displacement will occur in the secondary competition?
By the same token, no.
And therefore, all that you can offer this inquiry is that there was an average rate across all these, and the 29,000 rooms would be transferred at an average rate. That's your position.
Correct.
Even though the competition doesn't work in that way.
On aggregate, it does.
No. Let's just start this with some context. This is only dealing with rooms, isn't it?
It is.
So it's accommodation only. You've identified that you're 100% competitive with the other luxury providers. And I'm accepting that you might say that the new hotel's above them in terms of luxury, but the luxury providers, you're 100% competitive with them, yes?
Yeah.
And 75% or 75% competitive with the secondary market, yes?
Correct.
And 10% with the tertiary market, we might call it.
Correct.
If I take the luxury market that you're competing in and competing with, can we agree that you're less likely to be competing with the grotty room at the Waldorf that's small and back and the one that you describe as non-luxurious? Do we accept that?
I understand, yes.
Therefore, the competitive pressure is more likely to be on the higher quality suites and rooms within those particular hotels.
Correct.
Yes. And as a consequence, in terms of the likely displacement from those hotels, it will be the higher order rooms that are effectively the person moves from going to the new hotel.
I understand what you're saying.
And
I
you agree.
with you.
And in that context, therefore, even within the luxury sector, it's not going to be the average rate that they lose. It's going to be above average that transfers to the new hotel. Is that correct?
For those hotels, yes.
Yes. And when I get to the secondary market, where there does appear possibly to be quite a price disparity between the secondary market and your new proposed hotel, would you accept that?
I would.
So again, in that secondary market, it's going to be the best of rooms that is going to be diverted as opposed to the lesser quality rooms.
Indeed.
Yes. So higher than that average, and possibly the very tops of those rooms that would be lost.
Yes, but don't forget that some of those secondary competitors, the movement might be into the other 4 hotels that we have within that primary competition.
Can I just be clear that I don't care about private hotels and what they lose, okay? That's not the game I'm interested in at all. I'm only interested in what ends up in your new hotel, if that's okay. So you understand the context of my questioning?
I think...
Yes, yeah. And equally, now that we're into the tertiary market, it's quite hard to conceive of many guests choosing, would have come to Edinburgh and gone to one of the tertiary hotels, choosing a Rosewood. That's pretty unlikely.
Which is why we apply a 10% factor and not a 75 or 100%.
Yeah. And insofar as we're talking about the non-accommodation transfer of value, the proposed hotel has about 40% of that is taken up in non-accommodation. Yes?
Correct. Correct.
And insofar, do you accept that that element of competition will again be most fiercely competed over with your primary competitors?
I accept that.
Yeah. Now, I've just got one further brief matter to deal with, Mr. Kett, and hopefully we can deal with it very quickly. In your cannibalisation paper, you make reference to an uplift in tone. Do you recall that?
I do.
Now, first of all, can I take you to RHSPT 7, please? This should be a paper you're very familiar with, Mr. Kett, is it?
I can't say I am. The Nashville market isn't something that I'm intimately acquainted with.
Have you got the, if you build it, they will come?
Yeah.
And it's quoted in your cannibalisation document as one of the justifications.
The Nashville hotel market is not something
Okay.
that I can comment on.
Okay, so you're not particularly familiar. So whatever we take from this, it's from the document. It's not your professional experience. Is that correct? There didn't seem to be much on the list that would be attractive to you anyway, I have to say, Mr. Kett, as we'll come on to. But can we look at what actually happened and go on to page 2 of this document? Because what this is essentially illustrating is that a hotel was built and there are subsequent claims of the benefits it had to other hotels in terms of uplift in business. Is that the tenor of why this has been cited?
I would have to read it to check it. If you don't mind, I'm happy to do so.
Would you like a couple of minutes to read this document properly?
Please.
I think that's fair.
I get the gist.
Yes. And it just probably isn't particularly analogous, is it? Shall we have a look? Page 2, above the text before it says Exhibit 3. Growth in the national hotel market. Have you got that heading? And there's 2 paragraphs underneath Exhibit 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we see there? An answer to this question can be traced back to September 2013, because this is why the national hotel market has grown. When the Omni Nashville Hotel, a convention centre property, opened in downtown. The 800-room facility includes 80,000 square feet of a conference space, i.e. a conference centre, 21 meeting rooms and 2 ballrooms. Do we see that? And on top of that, the Omni is integrated with the Music City Centre, a large modern convention centre that opened in May 2013, offering 1 million square feet of exhibition and meeting space. Yes? So what this is a scale offering that fundamentally changed the conference and exhibition offer that Nashville could offer, isn't it?
Correct.
And the consequence of that was that the combined entities of the hotel, the convention centre, which was directly attached to it, and the 1 million square feet exhibition centre resulted in additional demand for other hotels in Nashville.
Understood.
Yes, is that right? And we see over the page, Exhibit 4 is Downtown Nashville Hotels, upscale and above. So we're back to upscale and above. And as you see, it's not very luxurious in Nashville, Mr. Kett. No. But to put it in context, perhaps the way of putting it to you in this particular instance, as you acknowledged in scale terms, the impact of a 127-room hotel on the whole Edinburgh market is too small to quantify with any accuracy. Yes? And the impact of the Omni Nashville Hotel in relation to this particular thing was of such a scale that along with other offer, it was able to shift the whole hotel market, wasn't it?
I understand.
Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And it's not analogous to one 127-room hotel in the Edinburgh context?
There is very little evidence, I suspect, that one can draw upon, but I understand what you're saying.
And secondly, in terms of an upturn in tone purely from adding a luxury one, that will have already occurred in part through the increased luxury offer of W and Virgin. Is that correct?
Not to the extent that we're talking.
No. And have you got any direct evidence where a city has got a new luxury hotel that there's been a 5% increase in tone everywhere else?
From my current experience, there has been a relatively similar shift recently in somewhere like Barcelona, where the entree of a Mandarin hotel has proven to have benefited the competitive market.
Is there a research paper for that?
There isn't that I'm aware of, but I'm answering your question to the best of my ability.
And can we also understand that when we look at something like if you build it, they will come, that in order to make these arguments, a fairly detailed analysis has to be undertaken of before and afters and being able to demonstrate how the individual investments had the catalytic effect?
Well, 20/20 hindsight is a wonderful thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Innes. Do you have much re-examination, Mr. Steele? You hinted not much.
Better than that, sir. I've none at all.
Do you have any questions? We have none either. Thank you very much, Mr. Kett. Okay. The suggestion was that we might be under pressure to finish this week, and that we might. And we wonder, therefore, whether it might be sensible to start at 9:30. Any views on that?
Great idea, sir.
Any problems caused by that to anybody? If we ran into time trouble tomorrow, would there be any issues with taking over a witness until Friday that we planned for Thursday?
Well, sir, I was going to ask realistically what others thought might be the likely progress, because matters are in the hands of others with my witnesses, and I didn't anticipate we'd only have covered 2 witnesses by 5:20. I thought better progress than that. And the other issue, of course, is that there are 4 additional witnesses coming from other parties, and a question that I have is, will they be restricting to their precognition, or will Mr Innes be asking an additional hour's worth of evidence in chief? Because that dramatically transformed things, and I do think there is a risk, if not a real risk, that we'll not finish on Friday, and we may have to make contingency plans for next week.
That's, of course, why I'm raising it now, so it would be helpful if others could give us some indication. Mr Thompson, anything you want to say on that?
I would have thought that the remainder of the appellant's witnesses would be quicker than today's 2. I certainly am not proposing to take any additional evidence in chief from either of my witnesses.
Thank you. Mr McIntosh.
I would anticipate being not very long with Mr Jones, and no longer than I was with Mr Kett when it comes to Mr Finney. At the moment, I'm not planning to ask any further questions to Mr Batas, but I suppose that's possible that might emerge, but I'm not anticipating that at the moment.
Okay, and Mr Innes.
Well, I predicted when we were asked earlier that we would get to this level of progress today. Everyone was suggesting we would finish all 4. I suggested we'd finish 2. My prediction for tomorrow is things will go much quicker, and that we will be largely through the necessary witnesses tomorrow. That's my anticipated. I don't have lengthy cross-examination of the other witnesses because they don't have technical papers to the same extent and length, and they're not dealing with methodologies, which always takes the time. As far as Dr. Conlon is concerned, I don't anticipate having a lengthy examination in chief. The only reason that the examination in chief with Mr Welsh was fairly extensive is a whole range of topics had been canvassed in evidence rather than precognition, and in those circumstances one is entitled to raise it in chief. So I'm confident.
Now, but as far as Friday's concerned, you don't anticipate?
Don't anticipate more than 10 or 15 minutes, and indeed it may be, depending on timing, whether we might. And Dr. Conlon's precognition is very short in any event.
Okay. Well, we'll start at 9:30 tomorrow. We'll see how we get on and whether we need to make arrangements for extending how long we're here on Friday and whether that affects the order. But we'll deal with that tomorrow. So 9:30 here. Thank you.